peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
In many parts of Africa, there is always a struggle for power. Struggle for power begins from the struggles for internal democratization of our parties or units where we belong when we come to power. The politics of compensational structure, the politics of deficit, the beginning from a deficit, that I had a deficit. I had a deficit before I was born, or when I was born. I found myself in a poor family. It's the politics of compensation that haunts Africa today. Many people want to take on leadership, but it's the leadership as a basis of where you came from, or the leadership has qualities.
My father bought me my first shoe in 1981 from a Mr. Onyango on the street for 60 shillings because he could not afford the butter shoes. Why am I saying this? Today, as you can see, the gentleman who did not have shoes is sitting at the high table. With the son of the founding father.
Sasa kama nitaambiwa naongea siasa, lakini I'm not, I promise. I have no such intention. But, you know, when you hear people out there, you know, they talk, oh, huyu mtu fulani, dynasty hii, sijui dynasty hii. It's not about that. Leadership is not about where you were born. It's not about where you came from. It's not about the color of your skin. It is not about your tribe. It is just about a desire to serve, a desire to do good, a desire to make a difference in the lives of people. And anybody can do that.
For a leader to be a leader, he must have qualities. Identify himself with qualities of good behavior, qualities of no corruption, qualities of no hatred, qualities of engagement, discussion with others, collective responsibility, listening to the people. These are the qualities. A leader who delivers does not need to have a background. A leader who delivers can deliver without a background of the rich or the poor. Many people in Africa seem to be misinterpreting that once you are born, you directed God to produce you in a particular family. None of us would have been where we are had we actually had a message from God where we would be born. I therefore look at this as compensational politics. Meritocracy is the answer. Meritocracy gives you the position that you yearn for. Meritocracy delivers you a position. Meritocracy gives you what you are doing for the people of Kenya or Uganda or whatever country where you are in Africa. But if you don't have these qualities, even if you are born from a family that had the whole world as theirs, then you cannot be a leader. It is therefore very important that leaders who yearn to become leaders in Africa stop the usage of compensational politics. The politics that you want to compensate on others simply because you were poor, simply because you didn't go to a good school, simply because you don't drink in the same place where they drink, simply because you don't eat in that restaurant, simply because you don't have cars. That politics has got syndromes, traits of people who are either corrupt or have hatred or have a problem on itself. I therefore call upon you people to re-examine as Africans that wherever you come from, the background you come from, you are an African. You can deliver something for your country. You don't need to be able, you don't need to come to compensate for the lost past, because with such attitude, you will grab everything and your country will collapse. Thank you very much for listening.
Launching the BBI Task Force report. Makofi.
Your Excellency, I am very happy that the document, the recommendations, and the proposals that have been put forward informs us on how to build institutions to get our politics away from personalities and ethnicities to institutions that will carry all of us irrespective of who we are, where we come from, the language we speak, or the political party we subscribe to.
Kusema ya kwamba pesa mingi ije mashinani, tunaunga mkono. Ipelekwe mpaka ifike kama kuanzia 35% kuelekea juu. Hiyo pesa itumike kwa mambo ya maendeleo, not for consumption. Recurrent expenditure should not be above 30%. 70% should go for development.
Ni kwa nini baada ya kila miaka mitano tunaenda miaka mitatu ya kazi, miaka ya 2 tunapoteza kwa sababu siasa imechacha? Tunataka tuulize wafanyabiashara wetu wenzetu, ni nini inawazuia? Ni nini tuwaweza kufanya ndio tuhakikishe ya kwamba biashara zenu hazisimami? We must have development plans that are 20 years plus if we are to resolve our problems, my brothers and sisters. Tunataka tuwapatie assurance ya kwamba wanaweza kupatia wananchi mikopo ya miaka 10, miaka 15, kwa sababu they have confidence ya kwamba Kenya will be stable and Kenya will always have leadership, whoever it is.
A very good morning to you, and indeed it's a happy new year from me. I think it's the first time we're meeting since 2020. I was on a short break. I just came back this year. So thank you so much, hoping that you've started the year quite well. Here we're okay, and we're ready to bring you the news in Africa, all that will be happening this year. And we have a lot to be looking forward to this year. A lot of elections will be happening here in Africa this year. Uganda is going to its elections. I think also Burundi is having its elections this year, among other African countries. So we have a lot to look forward this year, and a lot is at stake, and we shall get into that in just a short bit. But first, I would just like us to look at, what's making news headlines here in Kenya is as we continue to look at the legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta. Of course, this year, towards of the end of last year, I saw one of the newspapers saying that this year, 2020, could be the make or break for President Uhuru Kenyatta in regards to his Big Four agenda. So I think this is a very important year that President Uhuru Kenyatta will be seeking to make sure that whatever vision that he has for Kenyans and his Big Four agenda has to be delivered. At least Kenyans must start to feel, some of these things are trickling down to the common mwananchi. And so it will be very interesting to see what plans the president has for this year, and what he intends to do in terms of the strategy, the structure he has to make sure that he delivers on his Big Four agenda, that he's something that he plans to leave as the legacy. He wants to be remembered that he changed Kenyans' lives with this Big Four agenda. Remember, the first time president was elected, he had a lot on his plate. He was fighting the case that he had at the ICC, so he didn't get to do much. So a lot of things that he had planned, he had promised in his first term. He was not able to do that because of that case that he had to deal with at the ICC. Among other things, that was the first time that Kenya was implementing the new constitution that was promulgated in 2010. So it was so much, and that is also the time that we were testing, of course, the new constitution, which came with, the 47 counties. And so there was still, we did not have structures in place at that time. And so the first time, nothing much was done. And so there are a lot of things that also President Uhuru Kenyatta had promised before his first election that Kenyans did not get to see. But of course, I think when he came to power, he realized, perhaps this was just, we might have been caught up in that election fever. So when he got to becoming a president, he realized some of these things might not have been, perhaps not well thought through. And so he said, I'll just narrow these things into four, and the Big Four agenda now. And this, I think, is something that I'm going to do to Kenyans. And that is what President Uhuru Kenyatta says. So under that, we have manufacturing, and we know the small-scale businesses in Kenya are the backbone of this economy, together with agriculture, that falls under another Big Four agenda that he has in terms of he wants to leave Kenya a food-secure country. I mean, we are in the 21st century. And we are approaching that season. We are in January. Come February, March, April, we'll start seeing some not very pleasant images of Kenyans, dying of anger at different parts of the country from famine and drought and things like that. And so I think food security is very important and paramount. If we have to have, a citizen that is good, a citizen whose stomach is full, then they can go out there and be industrious. The children can go to school and enjoy the free education, and that will help a lot. So I think at this time, President Uhuru Kenyatta must make sure that the dockets that are concerned, especially with food security in this country, that includes the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Water, because some of these things fall under these ministries, say the building of dams and things like that, because agriculture cannot exist in isolation. It's always attached to other things that have to work for this thing to work out very well. So we've seen a few challenges, especially in the Ministry of Agriculture, and in the manner in which the farmers in this country have not been treated very well, in terms of they have a lot of input for their produce, and then at the end of the day, the Ministry of Agriculture or the people concerned don't get to buy from the farmers. Instead, you've seen cartels thriving at the expense of our local farmers there. So that is something that President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Ministry of Agriculture and the people concerned has to make sure that should this food security be realized in this country, then something drastically has to be done. And those images of Kenyans dying in the northern part of Kenya into Canada, like we saw last time, I think that is something that, Kenyans are tired of seeing, because Kenya is a country where nobody should be dying of anger. extreme side of the country, there's plenty, matter of fact, so much that get wasted there. And then the other side of the country, people are dying of anger. That is something that is quite oxymoronic that we don't understand. And even last time, I remember when, the Red Cross came out and said, you know what, so this is how much you need from Kenyans this time. And, we've been giving and giving year in, year out. And there are also some, projects that even from the Kenyans money that was going to support, the Red Cross project of having a dam somewhere in the Kalanu, dam that never came to be. And a lot of money was spent in that. So Kenyans said, no, we don't think so. We are not giving this time. We shall not until you account. So we can say that Kenyans are now woke, and we are demanding more from our leaders. So I think if we keep demanding from the county governments, we keep demanding from the national government, we keep demanding from the leaders that we have elected, then maybe and then hold them into account, then some of these things perhaps we might realize, and these ugly images and these very dehumanizing images that we see of not just Kenyans, but across Africa, across the globe, but particularly in this country, I think will be a thing of the past. So I think that President Uhuru Kenyatta must. This is something that he has to do as a necessity, because we cannot keep like we're gambling, with something that is very important to the country, and that is the Ministry of Agriculture and the people concerned, and that other institutions that are concerned. We have to make sure that our farmers are supported. The fertilizers that are supposed to be given to the farmers in good time, they're supposed to be delivered, but you find that some of them are now rotting somewhere or sitting somewhere at a warehouse, and the government has bought these things at a subsidy. The farmers are supposed to get it at a discounted price to make sure that they're supported in that way, and you realize the people who are supposed to be benefiting from this are not able to benefit. I think we've seen a lot of these cases, in newspapers, in the news, and so I hope that this year that is something that President Uhuru Kenyatta must take very, very seriously if he wants to realize or to make sure that Kenyans benefit from this vision that he has for us to be food secure. It is not enough just to put it on paper. It has to be felt. The farmers have to feel it, who are making sure that this country is fed. They have to feel that support from the local government, from the national government, and anybody who is seen to be impeding this, or who is seen to be, not having the same vision. I think that President Uhuru Kenyatta, this year, you only have this year and perhaps the next year, but the next year's campaigns would have reached its peak. If right now we're having elections in 2022, but you would think we're having elections sometimes in April, because now, the politicians, they're taking a break from over Christmas and the New Year, now they're back, and you've seen a lot of political activities taking shape. And I know this year, seeing that we have the BBI report here, which perhaps will take much time, being debated, because you've seen the politicians are back on it again. So that will take so much time, developmental time that is supposed to be channeled, the time that is supposed to be channeled in other things. So I think that priority is very important for this government. If President Uhuru Kenyatta wants to realize some of these things, then he has to prioritize, and he has to put the people that he feels share the same vision as him to be able to deliver, to implement, to deliver on what he has for Kenyans. Otherwise, it will just be very nice looking on paper, but it will not be actualized. So I think this, as the newspaper, I think was it a Standard on a Daily Nation towards the end of last year, they say the year that will be a make or break for the president. I think they meant that either the president has to make very, very drastic changes, and maybe others which will not make some parts of his friendships or his colleagues or his political affiliation very happy, but he has to do it if at all he wants to make sure that he leaves Kenya a better place than he found it. And as I said there earlier, the first term of President Uhuru Kenyatta, really, he didn't do much. There's a lot of promises he made prior to being elected for the first time, but we know that the president had a case that he had at the ICC that took so much of his time, of the 5 years, I think about 2-3 years he spent on that. And then that is the time also that we were implementing the new constitution, so a lot of things were not in place. So the country was still putting structures in regards to devolution and understanding how some of these institutions will be working in accordance to a new constitution. So not much really was done, to be honest. Not much was done in President Uhuru's first term. But one thing that was successful is the free maternal health care for mothers here in Kenya. If you go and you're delivering a child, or if you're going even for a prenatal clinic, it's free. It's free of charge. And if a child under 5 years, I think that also happened when President Mwai Kibaki was in power. Children under the age of 5, if you go to, when you go to any public hospital, you're treated for free. So that is something that the only thing I think also with Huduma centers also that is something that has really changed how Kenyans, the lives of Kenyans. Personally, I have benefited from that. My ID got pickpocketed in the middle of the CBD there. I went to apply for a new ID. 2 weeks later, I had it. Long time. I would wait for 3 months. And the process of even going from one police station to the next. When I went there, I was surprised. There is a police, they have a police post there, the same room. So you go, you get your abstract, and then you move to the next place. So it has made things very, very easy. And also, we've seen also registration of if you're registering for a new business, or it's easy now with we call it the e-citizen, even online now. So that is something that is remarkable. I think that has changed the manner in which businesses are being done in this country, and the manner in which we get some services. Yesterday, I was just going through one of my social media networks, and a person was shocked to learn that he had applied for his passport renewal of a passport in the morning. In the afternoon, he received a message that it was nearly done. By evening, he was told his passport was ready. And that is something that we could not hear about many, many years ago. I remember when I applied for my first passport a couple of years ago, you wait, for weeks on end, and you have to go there physically. But now things have been made easier with the e-citizen platform. So that is, I think, very good. And indeed, digitalizing a lot of these services has, lessened even the corruption that was being, when you go to Nyayo House, or when you go to, that is the immigration, or when you go to other offices, you're looking for a birth certificate, you're looking for whatever it is. It used to be very difficult because of the cartels. They're literally there. And so this has helped Kenyans in receiving services. So that is something that I think President Uhuru Kenyatta and Huduma Center will be remembered with. But now on this Big Four agenda, he has to make sure that it just doesn't look pretty on paper and wonderful on paper. It has to be, Kenyans must feel this now. Of course, the housing project has taken off. Also, the affordable housing, we've seen it across the country, and they're coming up very well. And also, you received, I think, a lot of some money from the World Bank in support of that project. So that is something that also is coming up. So we really want to know this year moving forward. Personally, I want to know what are some of the findings from the piloting of the universal healthcare that he had in the 4 counties. I want to know what are some of the things that can be replicated across the country. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that can be borrowed that Kenyans can benefit with? So that is something that I'm looking forward that the information that the government can make available, among other things. And of course, we'll be here to update you on what is happening. So in other news in this country this morning, and as I said, this year in Africa, we have a lot to look forward to, and we will come to that in just a bit. But just let us go to the front pages of the Kenyan newspapers this morning. And of course, the Daily Nation, how Al-Shabaab plotted raid on military camp. Yesterday, I was actually watching this news earlier today because the local news outlets did not have a very clear, some information was not being given out. So I was watching it on Al Jazeera this morning before I left the house. And so apparently the attackers emerged from a nearby forest and cut power supply before gaining access into the naval base through an unmanned side of Manda Strip. KDF personnel responded swiftly, killing 5 militants. Down raid lasted 5 hours. So the Al-Shabaab, and I think from Al Jazeera, they were showing these propaganda videos from the Al-Shabaab, how they were able to cause mayhem, I think 3 hours before anybody could come there. But as we can see here, a lot of them, the KDF, the Kenya Defense Forces, were able to kill 5 of these Al-Shabaab, but also I think the U.S. lost 3 of its people there. I think, yes, because this is a naval base for United States as well as for Kenya there. I think they share that or something like that. So what is really was puzzling is the manner in which that is supposed to be a well-condoned area. So how the Al-Shabaab were able to access even to the inside of this is quite puzzling. So we can see, and that if you're wondering why this target, I'm sure unless you've been somewhere in a cage over the weekend, but headlines across the world was that this assassination of Mr. Soleimani, a ranking member of the military there in Iran by the United States. And, the manner in which President Donald Trump came out and he was seen to be even adding, salt to the injury and trying to, thinking that he's done a good job. And remember, President Obama and President Bush had opportunities, numerous opportunities. They would have taken out Mr. Soleimani, but they thought it was not wise. And so, that was not expected. And so let's just see how that will work out for them. So this could be as a response. This attack at the Manda airstrip there, the naval base there, must have been maybe after that attack that happened, after that assassination of the Iranian, military man there, Mr. Soleiman, who was, killed in Iraq. I think he was on his way to the airport together with another person who I can't remember his name. And we shall look at that later on with Dr. Matanga. The Iran and the Iran-US war as it is right now, what effect will it have for the rest of us? Because obviously Iran cannot go attack the US. It does not have the capabilities to go attack the US outrightly. But they've said that they will avenge. So what they will do now, they will look for the soft spots, like as we've suffered before, the 1998 bombing that happened in Kenya and Dar es Salaam was after, a fallout over there. So the proxy wars, we get to be, to be the victims, and we suffer. So this is not just something that will stay between Iran and the US. This is something that, and we've seen Hezbollah there in Lebanon now being, energized, and they're saying, you know what, we're here and we're going to help, Iran fight, and the Hamas, because this guy was able to talk to all these militia groups, the Hamas there in Palestine, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Al-Qaeda. He was able to talk with these people. So this is not just another Iranian who has died out because of activities of the US. This is something quite serious, and perhaps the repercussions is something that President Donald Trump might not have thought it through, but that is something, a conversation that we should have when Dr. Matanga joins all later on in the afternoon. So thank you so much. I see your writing, and thank you so much. And a very happy New Year to you. We're meeting for the first time 2020. I hope that you had a wonderful festive season. You were well rested, and you're rejuvenated, and you're ready to work hard and go after your goals this year 2020, as we'll be here doing the business of letting you know what's happening in the continent. So just earlier on, I just looked at the legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta. And this, honestly, I think is a make or break for President Uhuru Kenyatta. And this is the year he's supposed to make very tough decisions. If at all he wants to make sure that he achieves his big four agenda, he has to sit on the driver's seat, make very tough decisions so that Kenyans can, one day say, you know what, when President Uhuru Kenyatta was president in this country, I got to able to buy a house. I was able to, suffering from cancer, but I was able to afford the treatment for it because of the universal, healthcare. My child was able to get better education because of this and that, because when President Uhuru Kenyatta was in power. So that is something, a legacy that President Uhuru Kenyatta must guard zealously, if at all he wants to be remembered, and history will be kind on him. He has to sit on the driver's seat, protect his legacy zealously and make sure that he delivers to Kenyans. That is the only way that Kenyans will want to remember him. So thank you so much, and a happy new year to you, Brighton Eka, Bismarck Dura there, happy new year. And Eze Tobias Eziamaku there, you're saying good morning to you. And Bismarck, you're saying welcome back. Thank you so much. I'm well rested. I hope you rested well. But, Dr. Matsanga was here holding the fort while the rest of us were away. So also another something that I watched in the news yesterday that was really shocking that I see on the front pages of the daily newspaper. A pastor kills wife, then self during a church service. Somber start to the year for faithful as a man of God slits his throat after fatally stabbing his wife. Leaves suicide note detailing marital wars. I mean, if it's not working, if the relationship has refused, the best thing sometimes you can do to yourself is just leave. But sometimes people feel that you've invested so much of your time, so much of yourself, so much that you cannot afford to leave. But what will it profit if you lose your life? And this was the case yesterday. I was shocked. This pastor, they went to church as usual. He's a pastor in the church together with a wife. So apparently he had taken a loan, bought the land, built the church, and they were about to separate because the marriage was not working anymore, but they're not separated yet. So apparently the wife wanted to remain with part of the property, and the pastor said, oh no, I worked for it, I got a loan for this, and we worked on this together, we built this together, so no. So he decided, you know what, I'll come with a knife. So he stabbed the wife in the church, and then he later on killed himself. Very sad. I can't even begin to imagine what even the faithfuls that had woken up just a normal Sunday going to church hoping to be fed the spiritual word, and then the same pastor ended up killing himself in the same church and killing the wife. That is just sad. And so yes, indeed, so that happened, and it's quite shocking. Just leave. I don't know. I think we should start encouraging people to, if it's not working, just leave. It's not the days of our mothers and fathers where you stayed in a marriage. Even if it's not working, you just stayed there for the sake of children or society, because you are expected. A long time ago when you married in the African culture, you married. So divorces was something that was not really, if you heard somebody was divorced, you are looked at a different way. But now we're living in different times. Life has become very difficult. The challenges are different now. The dynamics of lifestyles are different now. So it has come with its own, challenges that people are not able to cope with very well. So you see a lot of killings, gender-based violence, killings of spouses, and suicide, missions. They are on the increase. So something is definitely not going on very well, in the society. And of course, today in Kenya, schools reopened today to a packed calendar there. So that is the Daily Nation. Thank you so much. Just keep it here. Let me just get through this newspapers in Kenya, then I'll come. I have a lot to look at in Africa. So many countries. We have a lot to catch up with. We've not talked about Africa for a while, so I have a lot to talk about. So just keep it here. Just give me another 3 minutes. About 3 minutes, I finish up with these two newspapers. We're looking at the front pages there, and the Star newspaper, Kenya caught in the US-Iran conflict, as I said there earlier, as Al-Shabaab hits terrorist heat base and Mandra airstrip in Lamu, 5 attackers dead. I will not get into the details of that because we'll look at that when Dr. Matsanga gets here. And also the Mombasa pastor stabs wife, kills himself at pulpit. We also talked about that. And also, a farm played dirty to help Uhuru to win. That is according to Memo. And if you want to know, let me see. A global data mining company, Cambridge Analytica, employed all manner of tricks, including dirty ones, to help President Uhuru Kenyatta and DP Ruto win. So if you want to know the details of that, just go to page 6 there of the Star newspaper. I wonder why this is coming out now. Yeah. And also, Miguna jets back into the country tomorrow. If you've been following him on Twitter, he's been abusing and accusing and making all sorts of accusations. And so he's saying he's coming back. Remember what happened the last time he was here? So I think all eyes will be on the general himself, as he calls himself, Mr. Miguna, who will be jetting back into the country. Remember, he was deported. Yes, it's only in Kenya where you deport a Kenyan who was born here. You deport him out of the country that is not a Kenyan. It's ridiculous in the manner in which this happened. But now he's coming back. I don't know. So it will be interesting if you've been going through his Twitter. He's quite entertaining there, Mr. Miguna. So of course, all eyes will be at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport for the arrival of lawyer there, Miguna, who has been in Canada, was deported there in Canada after the famous swearing in of, Raila Odinga, I remember. Yes, and so after that, I think it was the lawyer who must have overseen that swearing in. So that got him into trouble. Well, the government could not go for Raila, so they went for, him. He used to call himself the flower girl because he was not the main person there. But anyway, it fracased, and his mouth is not helping at all. So let's see how that will turn out tomorrow. And also puzzle of terror raid on KDF, a US base, also on the front pages there of the Standard newspaper, and also still on the front pages there, bursary school fee nightmare for parents as the possibility of thousands of needy students missing out on an education turns into reality. Stakeholders fault manner in which bursaries are managed, even as CS Magoha this week launches a LIMU program for 9,000 beneficiaries. And I think this is also something that President Uhuru Kenyatta, the 100% transition that started with the CS Matiang'i was the Minister for Education. They want the children who has finished their primary school to transit to high school. So, and then from there, they can choose to go to a vocational training if they did not qualify to go to a university. There we have polytechnics that, of course, the government had promised will be built across all the 47 counties to make sure that all these children are absorbed, and so when they go out into the market, at least they're able to get a skill. If it's not professionally, as a professional skill that they'll pursue through education, but they're able to get a life skill that can help them through life, which I think is it's such a noble idea, and we see it happening in other countries across the world. A place like Germany has done very well in that. But Kenya is just something that it has its own challenges. But I'm hoping that it will come a time where we are able to get everybody to where they belong. For those who are not perhaps academically gifted, we can find them other places, and we can have a country that everybody is included. And you're not just because you don't do well in class doesn't mean you're not gifted in other ways. And so it's still a nightmare, but we are hoping that it will get to a place where this is able to be realized fully, because I think it's a very noble idea, and also it will, just help, in terms of getting skilled people there in the market. We cannot have everybody as doctors and teachers and all. We need qualified masons. We need qualified electricians. We need all of these people to have a smooth running of our societies. So I think that it's a noble idea. Of course, it's still facing a few challenges, but I'm hoping with time we shall be able to get it right as a country. And also on the front pages of the Standard newspaper there, Jubilee election sets up Uhuru Ruto allies clash, and party elections for Jubilee are scheduled for end of March. It could mark a beginning of political face-off between President Kenyatta and Deputy Ruto's allies who are plotting to take control. And remember, the Deputy Ruto's side, they have been asking for these elections for a very long time. So now there it is, it will be happening. And I think before I took a break over for the new year, the newspaper there, I think Mr. Tuju, who is the Secretary General of the Jubilee Party, had said those people who have been mentioned in corruption will not be allowed to vie for this party. speech, I think. That is just heading for a Jubilee party there. Let them deal with it. So happy New Year to you, Mobe Jada, and thank you so much for watching. Yes, it's still morning here, just a few minutes past 11:30 there, around 11:37. Thank you so much. Good morning. A sunny morning here in Nairobi. Indeed, it's a beautiful year, and we are energized. We are ready to be bringing you the latest here in Africa. And I said there earlier, there are a lot of things that we're looking forward that will be happening in this continent. Of course, the elections that will be happening. That election from Uganda that I think is set for what? Next month, I think. And also where President Yoweri Museveni is being challenged by Bobi Wine. I don't know if he's already registered as a presidential candidate. I'm not sure. But yeah, he said he's running and he wants to challenge President Yoweri Museveni. I don't know if, the opposition has come together yet, but there's no news of that because they'd signed a memorandum of working together earlier sometimes back last year, Mr. Bobi Wine together with, the long-suffering opposition leader, Mr. Kizza Besigye there of Uganda, but somehow the structures and the manner in which they were going to work together was not really made public. So you're just wondering, will Bobi Wine, support Kizza Besigye, or will Kizza Besigye, agree to support Bobi Wine's candidature? That is something that we've not been told. So we don't know what that really memorandum of understanding that they signed. Really, we don't understand how that working relation, how that was supposed to be, because they didn't divulge a lot of information in that. But as I said there, Uganda is going to its election this year. And I think also Burundi is having its election this year, as well as other countries. I'll compile them and bring them to you tomorrow. But also something else we're looking at in this year here in Africa is, of course, South Sudan with the peace deal, the unity government that is meant to be formed next month. I think the deadline is the 22nd of February. So that is something also that will keep you up to date. And we'll be looking at here as we have always done. And as I've always said, I think after they failed to meet the deadline in May, and also they failed to meet the deadline in November, cautiously optimistic. Those are the words I choose to use. So yes, but you know what? Peace in South Sudan and stability in South Sudan will be a joy to the rest of the world. And so even the Pope there was urging the leaders of South Sudan. I think he said he might make another trip to South Sudan this year. So that is something that we shall be looking at, and we shall keep updating you on. And also remember, towards the end of last year, I think towards the end of last year, the parliament in Cameroon voted to give Anglophone a special status in southwest region there, in the Ambazonia region, as Anglophones like to be called. And so, I don't know, this is something that Ambazonians did not appreciate, and they're saying they do not want a special status. They want a referendum that will finally allow them to have their own country. So this is a story we shall be following, this special status. What does it even mean to the people of Anglophone there in Amazonia and also Biafra? Last year we saw Mr. Nnamdi Kanu meet with the UN, with the United Nations Security Council members there in last year. And so this year we'll be following on the progress. What else does Nnamdi Kanu want to do to make sure that he continues to agitate and to let the world know what is happening exactly there in Biafra land? So last year we saw him meet with high-profile officials there from the United Nations Security Council in Vienna, not in Vienna, but in Brussels. So let's see what he has this year. And of course, I have some information about some utterances he made in his last broadcast of last year in Radio Biafra. So just keep it here. We have so much for you. So right now, let me just go straight into what is making news across Africa. That is just some of the things. And also, we cannot forget the Rwanda-Uganda row that started. It has been simmering for a while, but it was full-blown last year, and we've seen the borders being closed, we've seen meetings being postponed. I don't know what is happening, but this year, of course, this is also a story that we shall be following up for you and seeing really what next when it comes to the Uganda-Rwanda row. And of course, this year, later on, I think in June, the Kenya-Somalia row that is at the International Court of Justice. I think the case will start, so that is also something that we shall continue to update you about. Have I left anything out? Anything that we're supposed to be looking forward to this year? Of course, we want to see Boko Haram being finished, but that is something that Mr. Muhammadu Buhari is not, I don't know if he's committed, or I don't know if he just lacks the capacity. I don't understand, but that is something that is seen to be growing, in strength day by day, as we shall see while going through, this African news, the mayhem that Boko Haram has caused in Burkina Faso. So let's start with Libya, and the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said troops have begun moving into Libya to ensure stability for the United Nations recognized government on national accord in Tripoli. The military deployment was approved last week by the Turkish parliament to deter the Libyan rebel forces led by General Khalifa Haftar, who have been trying to capture the capital. General Haftar is backed by Egypt and the UAE, while the UN-backed government is supported by Turkey and its ally Qatar. The Turkish move was criticized by the United States, Egypt, and several other countries. United States. You know what? We'll talk about it. And then we go to Uganda, where Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni is on a 6-day march through the jungle, walking 195 kilometers. He is retracing his forces in 1986 route when they seized power after the fall of Idi Amin and Milton Obote. Critics have dismissed the march as a stunt ahead of Uganda's elections next year. No, I think this year, when Mr. Museveni is expected to seek a 6th term in office. Mr. Museveni will end his march in the western town of Biremo, the site of one of the fiercest battles between Mr. Museveni's rebels and then President Obote's troops on 10th of January. And we go to Guinea-Bissau, where Guinea-Bissau's ruling party has filed a petition at the Supreme Court asking to nullify the December 29, 2019 presidential rerun. The African Party for Guinea and Cape Verde Independence Friday filed the notice citing irregularities in the polls. Last Wednesday, the National Electoral Commission announced Mr. Umaro Sissoko Embalo of the Movement of the Democratic Alternative as the winner, but the PAIG's Domingos Samoes Pereira said the provisional results had irregularities, nullities, and manipulations. Supporters of Mr. Embalo, the president-elect, say the allegations have no legal basis. And by the way, the United States have said the elections were free and fair. I don't know if it matters, but yeah. And Nigerians and residents of Maiduguri, a capital of Nigeria's northeastern Borno state, have reacted to the withdrawal of Chadian troops from the Lake Chad region. Chad has ended a months-long mission fighting Boko Haram in neighboring Nigeria and withdrawn its 1,200-strong forces across their border, an army spokesperson confirmed on Saturday. And we go to the something also happened very interesting over the weekend, where Zimbabwe was the only African country that voted against a United Nations General Assembly resolution on Myanmar persecution of Rohingya Muslims. The resolution situation of Rohingya Muslims and other minorities in Myanmar was, however, passed overwhelmingly with 134 countries in favor as against 9 in opposition and 28 in abstentions. Others who voted against were Belarus, Cambodia, China, Laos, Myanmar, Philippines, Russia, and Vietnam. A number of African countries also abstained from the vote. Among them was Cameroon, Burundi, Eritrea, Kenya, Namibia, Lesotho, and Zambia. In November last year, the Gambia filed a case in the International Court of Justice, ICJ, against Myanmar. The case was filed on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, and Kenya abstained from this vote. All right. Or maybe Kenya is just trying to mind its own business, not being caught up in some of these things. Yeah. So we go to Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian parliament last week approved amendments to the country's controversial anti-terrorist legislation. The new version has more concise language as opposed to the old one, whose wording was criticized as vague by activists and human rights organizations. Prior to April 2018, the government routinely used the law to detain and charge activists, journalists, and opposition politicians. The new text also guarantees the right of workers to strike, even if this leads them to obstructing public services, an offense previously considered terrorism. And we go to Burkina Faso, where at least 14 civilians, and mostly students, died on Saturday after their bus hit an explosive device in northwestern Burkina Faso on the way back from a school break. That is according to local official information. At least 4 others were also injured in the explosion on the Togan axis in the Bokle de Mohon region, according to Regional Communications Director Momalu Asin Kayaba. And we go to South Sudan, where South Sudan President Salva Kiir has pardoned 30 prisoners, including political activist Peter Biar and businessman Karbina Wol Agok, as gesture towards peace and reconciliation. This following the country's implementation on a fragile peace deal. Now, the presidential decree releasing the 30 convicts were announced on state-based media on Thursday evening in the capital, Juba. The decision followed the president's visit to Juba Central Prison on Christmas Eve, where he said inmates with minor cases will be pardoned and promised to release some inmates who had shown good conduct on the New Year's Eve. Among those freed are prominent political activists there, Peter Biar Ajak and philanthropist Kerbino Wol Agok. And of course, still in South Sudan, and South Sudan's main coalition of donors are calling on leaders to urgently implement remaining tasks of the peace deal before February 22nd, 2020 deadline expires. On Saturday, the United States and Norway and the United Kingdom, the main countries that have funded peace negotiations in South Sudan, say the country is running out of time to create transitional unity government. Known as the Troika, the three urged the key principles to the revitalized peace agreement to commit themselves to finalizing the pending tasks before the lapse of the extended deadline. And we go to Algeria, where Algeria's richest man, Issad Rebrab, who heads its biggest privately owned conglomerate, Sevitol, went on trial Tuesday accused of tax, banking, and customs offenses. He was one of several tycoons arrested in April as part of a corruption probe following the resignation of President Abdelaziz Bouteflika after weeks of mass protest against his 20-year rule. That is the richest man in Algeria. You know, Algerians, they're not joking. I think they're setting precedents for the rest of us we should follow. Nobody's immune to the law. That is what they're trying to tell us. This is Algeria's richest man who is now in the courts facing corruption, among other charges. You know, interesting. And we come back in Kenya, and of course, the U.S. has confirmed that one service member and 2 Department of Defense contractors were killed on Sunday in the Manda Bay terrorist attack in Lamu, southeastern Kenya. It added that 2 Department of Defense members are nursing injuries. In a press release, Commander of the U.S. African Command General Stephen Townsend said the wounded are in a stable condition. More importantly, he said the U.S. resolve to defeat Al-Shabaab, which was behind the attack, remains unshaken. Thanks very much, Mr. Trump, by the way. And we go to Angola, where Isabel dos Santos, the daughter of veteran Angolan politician, former President Eduardo dos Santos, an Africa's richest woman, is now fighting a decision by the Angolan court to have her assets seized in a bid to recover debts she reportedly owes the government. According to Forbes, Ms. dos Santos' net worth is at $2.2 billion, making her Africa's richest woman. A Luanda Court on Monday ordered the freeze of all bank accounts of Miss Isabel Dos Santos and her Congolese husband Sindika Dokolo, as well as those of her business partner Mario Leite, the head of the Angolan Foment Bank. Now, in November 2017, the eldest daughter of the Angolan former president, Jose Eduardo Dos Santos, was sacked as chair of the board of the state-owned oil farm Sonangol, and also she was later forced out in 2017 when Yao Lorenzo took over from Dos Santos following an election. Dos Santos ruled Angola for 38 years, and his family and allies still control huge sectors of Africa's second largest oil producer. Now, Africa's second largest oil producer, I think, after Nigeria. And the president put his daughter as the person who's chairing the board to look at the board of the state-owned oil farm, Sonangol. You know what? We go to Cameroon, and the Ambazonia Military Forces, AMF, has declared the 7th and the 12th of February 2020 as a total lockdown days in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. This is in a bid to frustrate the holding of the 2020 municipal and legislative elections in the region, according to a communique signed by the Ambazonia Military Forces High Command Wednesday that is the new year. Movements in the towns and villages of the English-speaking regions have been restricted from the 7th to the 12th of February 2020. That is 2 days before the holding of the elections. I don't know, Ambazonians, if there are any of you watching here today, I don't know what you make of this move by the Ambazonia Military Forces. They're saying nobody will be allowed to vote, to participate in these elections, local elections that will be happening later in February this year. I don't know what you make of this move. Is it a smart move? Will it put enough pressure on President Paul Biya? And while you're at it, please let me know this special status that the Cameroon Parliament voted to give you. What do you make of it? All right. Let's keep the conversation. I'll read your comments very shortly. And we go to Biafra, where the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, Mr. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, Thursday berated those asking IPOB to go through appropriate channel to secure Biafra, accusing them of being hypocritical. Mr. Kanu also alleged that the 12 northern states allegedly practicing Sharia law have systematically and unlawfully removed themselves from the Nigerian and its constitution without the Nigerian government questioning their action, adding that the Biafra agitation for self-determination should equally not be questioned by the Nigerian government and its people. The IPOB leader in the last edition of the 2019 Radio Biafra broadcast and New Year message alleged that the British government is the greatest enemy of Nigeria as a country and Nigerian people, accusing them of supporting all manner of evils in favor of the people he describes as Al-Majiri Fulani, they allegedly easily manipulated. A very strong statements there by Mr. Nnamdi Kanu. I don't know what you make of that. Nnamdi Kanu there saying that, you know what, the British, they're not helping at all. And if anything, why do people have a problem? This is the argument that Mr. Nnamdi Kanu was putting forth. That why do people have a problem when Biafrans wants to self-determine, whereas and they're being accused of changing the law and wanting to going against the constitution. And they're saying there are other parts of Nigeria, and anyone out there who knows this, perhaps you can tell me if you can confirm this. He's saying there are other parts of Nigeria, the northern parts, who some states operate under the Sharia law that is not in accordance with the constitution, because there is a constitution that everybody in Nigeria is supposed to operate upon. So it's just wondering, why is it that these people who are operating outside of the Nigerian constitution, these states that are in the northern part of the country, allegedly are operating under Sharia law sort of thing. So they're not really operating under the Constitution of the Republic of Nigeria, of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So why is it that now when Biafrans wants to, have their own way of, determining their own lives and governance and constitution and things like that, why is it that they're being termed unlawful? I don't know if you understand this argument by Nnamdi Kanu. I don't know what you make of it. If you're watching me and you're a Biafran, I know this year you're looking for perhaps more developments in terms of even, just basing on the premise of last year, we see a lot of activities and the meeting that Mr. Nnamdi Kanu had with the United Nations Security Council members there, that of course, trying to just, tell the world or just explain to the world why is it necessary for Biafrans to be allowed to have a referendum, and for them, if they vote to leave, then they can leave Nigeria and have their own country. So he's been traveling and traversing across the globe, just trying to make people understand and explain the cause of Biafrans and the reason why, Biafran referendum and later on succeeding is something that is necessary. So he's been doing a lot of that. Britoneka, you're watching. Thank you so much for watching. And you're saying Bia is killing us, even children and women, but Africa is quiet. Yes, indeed. That has been happening a lot in the Amazonia region. And as I mentioned earlier there, you guys were given a special status. How is that working for you? Is that even what you want? And it appears that Mr. Paul Biya just rubbished everything else that Amazonia, the key concerns by the Amazonia, even during that, talk, that national dialogue that really was a mockery of a dialogue, because the people that Mr. Paul Biya was supposed to be having on the table to dialogue with and really have open and honest conversation were not present. So I don't know what he intended to achieve by that, but he says the dialogue was perfect, as Mr. Trump would say. It was perfect. It met the obligations. So what else? The points that he had laid there, I think about 8 points, he says, this is what we shall implement. And also now, comes here and says, so now we're going to give Anglophones a special status, and the issue of referendum, the issue of them leaving, no, that is not something we want to discuss. What we're going to do now is just make them just a special region in Cameroon, and so I don't know they'll be special in what sense, but some of those, I think the special status comes with that, the Anglophone part. Now you shall have a bilingual, you'll be allowed to teach, if the people who will allow the schools to be taught in French, then well and good. If there are courts where, he said if both the parties that are involved in a case and they present themselves in a court, then they'll be, and they speak French, then French will be allowed to be spoken there, because these are just some of the things that sparked now the chaos that has been there since about now 4 years ago, going to 5. Now we're in 2020. When the government wanted to forcefully have the Anglophone region being taught, the schools being taught in English, and also the court sessions there being carried out in not in English but in French, and also the court to take place in French, and the lawyers and the teachers came out and said, oh no, this is not going to work for us because we don't even speak French, we don't know French. So majority of this part of the country, it's an Anglophone region. It's an English-speaking region. Very interesting that we have to fight over some languages from there, not even our indigenous languages. But it's not just a language thing. If you were just to look at it from the surface, the matter of Anglophone is just not a language thing. It goes deeper. It is a systematic marginalization of a people. People who have been made to feel like a second-class citizen in their own country. People who have been feeling that, Paul Biya's government has not been serving their interests very well. They've been marginalized. In fact, parts of the Anglophone region in the Cameroon, the Anglophone region is the least developed, and that is also what is happening in Biafra. When you don't want to be inclusive, when you don't want to be fair, when you're distributing these resources, the national resources, you don't want to be fair, but you still insist that I have to be here. I don't get the services that the rest of the country is getting, but you still insist that I have to be part of this system that I feel is very unfair to me. I mean, what do you expect? What do you expect? People will get agitated. People will say, you know what? fine. Then I'd rather just move the other side and just find my way of just a place that my life will be much easier, because you cannot insist on containing these people, whereas you keep marginalizing against them. There's, and so that is where we are today. And as I said there earlier, these are stories that we shall be looking at, the new status for the Anglophone, the special, it's ridiculous, the special status. What? That is not the essence of the whole thing. It's not about English and French. That is beyond. That is on the surface level, a conversation and argument. This thing goes deep, and I think President Paul Biya is just out of touch, or just he chooses not to care. I'm sure he knows what's really happening there in the Anglophone region, but he chooses not to care. He chooses not to address the real issues that are affecting the Anglophones there in Ambazonia. I wish, because I think dialogue can really help the world. Now we have another war there caused by, Trump. And Soleimani, he's not a very clean man. He's killed people. He's done terrible things. But still, a tooth for a tooth, it's not solving any problems. I think that the world today, more than ever, and indeed Africa today, more than ever before, we require dialogue where, okay, fine, we come to the table, we have honest conversations, and then we move forward. You cannot insist on that you had a national dialogue and the people that were supposed to be part of that dialogue to have made it successful were not even part of that dialogue. And then you come out and say the dialogue was successful, and then later on you think so now Ambazonians will have a special status. That is just, I don't know. So now the Ambazonians military forces have come out and said, you know what, come 7th and to 12th of February, there will be a total lockdown. So this will be very interesting, because I don't think that Paul Biya's government will take this very lightly. So they're saying they do not want the northeast and the southwest, the northwest and the southwest region to hold the regional elections and to elect the municipal and the legislative elections. They do not, Amazonians do not want that to happen in that region. So they communicated that on the new year. And so they started a new year with a new resolution. And they said, you know what, one of the things we do not want to do this year is be part of this mockery of an election that is meant to be happening later in February. So I don't know if you're an Amazonian and you're watching, and one of you said he's watching here. I don't know if this is a very good move for Amazonians there. This total lockdown, will it not just make the Paul Biya's army just come on you guys very hard? I know, it can't get worse, but things continue to get worse, because I think you've seen so much, and so much has been, a lot of violence has been meted against you by the government, and there's cases that are now continuing there over even soldiers who raped women and killed and maimed, and it's very sad. But still, is this a good move, or will it only bring a lot of problems and a lot of chaos in that region? If you don't want to vote, can you just sit at home? Remember what happened in Tanzania last month? The opposition said we don't want to vote to participate in this vote because we feel it's not fair, whatever reasons they had, but they refused to participate, and CCM, the ruling party, had a nearly 99% win. And so you're going to be by yourself in parliament. You're going to be by yourself to formulate. It delegitimizes the whole process. So I think that sitting at home will be the best option. And if anybody decides they want to go vote, just let them. Remember what was happening during Nigerians' elections last year in February. Biafrans were not supposed to, the leader, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, said, you know what, don't go out there and vote. And, but he changed tunes the last minute. He said, you know what, if you feel you want to go and vote, you go do that. We're not going to hold you. If you feel you generally, there's somebody there you feel you want to be represented with or by, go ahead and vote. And so That helped to calm down that region because it was already on a very high alert, and any movement, the government was going to meet it with a lot of force and violence. So I think that I don't know if this is very wise. This Amazonian military forces. I didn't even know Amazonia had a military force. So they're saying there will be a total lockdown. What I think will be the best solution here, because now dialogue doesn't seem to be helping here, and whichever dialogue President Paul Biya had intended to happen really did not, address well the problems and the concerns of the Amazonians. I think that will be just don't participate, don't show up on the elections. In fact, don't leave your house if you really don't have to. Make sure you have supplies, food, everything you require, so that you don't have to go, you don't have to appear, so that the military, the Cameroon military, Paul Biya's military, doesn't get you on your way to buying some vegetables from the market and you're hurt. You can't keep putting yourself out there and continue to be hurt because, Amazonia we can't even say it's beginning to rebuild because nothing really is happening there. We saw the government closing even the schools that were serving the Amazonian schools. Remember, all the public schools were closed. So Amazonians decided, the Anglophones decided, we are going to have our private schools so that our children don't miss out so much. It's been over 4 years now, and the schools there have been closed. So they say, we don't want our kids to miss so much, so let's just give them any form of education that we can get. And the government came down and closed around 260 schools last year. That was in December last year. And you're thinking you're closing 260 schools. The population of these children that have now been completely and totally been denied an opportunity to get an education. I think that really, I get very upset over that, because if you cannot get these people educated, then the future of the Anglophone region, the next generation, is blink. There's no hope there. There'll be no skilled people. There'll be no professionals coming from the Anglophone region. So I think this is just wrong by all means. I think what the Cameroonian government would have done is perhaps even maybe make sure that qualified teachers were employed and just give the schools the supplies that were required as a responsible government. But we are talking about Paul Biya and Cameroon, so maybe that responsibility is a bit far-fetched. But I'm just saying, if he really truly cared, and he had the best interest of the Anglophones at heart, he would have made sure that these schools, what they get the staffs, the qualified teaching staff, and as well he makes sure that the government supplies with the equipment, with the tools, with the learning materials that these children require, so that they're not they don't lag behind compared to the francophone part of Cameroon. That is what a responsible government would have done, not close down all the schools. The government schools are closed, and now these other schools, 260 of them, your government, Paul Biya's government came and closed. Very unfair. And so moving forward this year, I think this is a story that we shall be looking at. Now, another story that really I could not wait. Well, I was on my break there to come here and talk about this Isabel dos Santos story. Oh my goodness. And she's not one of the richest women in Africa. She is the richest woman in Africa, and Forbes places her wealth at $2.2 billion US. This is the daughter of former president of Angola, Mr. Eduardo dos Santos, who was in power for 38 years. 38 years. I think he must have been the one leading, and then the Equatorial Guinea president, and then now Paul Biya, and then who else? Like that, yeah? And Yoweri Museveni, thereabout, right? So the father had been a president, Mr. Dos Santos, there for 38 years. And in his very wise 38 years in power mind, agreed something, I don't know, he decides to take the daughter. She's what? She's 45. She's not even that old. To take the daughter and places her to chair the board of the state-owned oil farm Sonangol. Well, that would not be a problem, say, if that was, say, Kenya. We're still trying to get that oil, but we don't have it like that. Okay? Like we don't have it in that magnitude. This matters because Angola is the second largest oil producer in Africa. So this matters. So the president took this lady, his daughter, and placed her as the chair of state-owned oil firm, Sonangol. That will be like what? The national oil of Kenya. I think we have it here. So a lot of money was siphoned through her. No wonder she is Africa's richest woman. And of course, she says she likes, she's an engineer, she studied, she's also a businesswoman, as she calls herself. But come on now. No. So anyway, Isabella dos Santos, the daughter of the veteran Angolan politician, former President Eduardo dos Santos, Africa's richest woman, is now fighting a decision by the Angolan court to have her assets seized in a bid to recover debts she reportedly owes the government. Her net worth is $2.2 billion US dollars. I think she owes the government, from that story I was reading, or from whatever I was watching all over. I think the last week before that thing happened, before the Iran assassination, that the guy that was assassinated in Iraq, Mr. Soleimani. I think that was the story. That was like the story here in Africa. And I was watching it, and I think she owes around 100 million. I mean, lady, you're worth 2.2 billion US dollars, and you owe the government, I don't know, the taxing and all of that, 100 million in taxes and other monies, and that was siphoned when she was, I think, chairing this board. 100 million US dollars. This is something that she could pay. She's 2.2 billion US dollars rich. I think this is something that she could pay. But also, this has been seen as a targeted, prosecution by President Lourenço Eduardo. Remember Lourenço, Jose Eduardo, that is the president, Angolan daughter, the eldest daughter of Angolan President, Mr. Jose Eduardo, that is Isabella dos Santos. But now the president, Lourenço, that he succeeded, Mr. Yao Lourenço, he succeeded Mr. Dos Santos, and they were very good buddies, political buddies and allies. And so Mr. Dos Santos thought, if I just put this person here that I can trust, then this person will dance to my tune and perhaps will protect my interest. And we've seen that backfired. That is the one case that all the political students should learn. I don't know what they teach there, the political science students, because politics is indeed a very, very dirty game. So now he thought that his ally, should he put him there, would protect him and will protect all the dirt that he was involved in when he was in power for 38 years. And 38 years, man, he must have accumulated so much dirt. So he thought, let me just put my person there. And so Lourenço will just take care of my interest and make sure he protects my whatever it is that I did, and my name and whatever, and my family interest and all of that. And guess what? When Mr. Lourenço came into power, things took a different turn. And, I don't even want to go to the case of Botswana, because I think it's the same thing that is happening there with former President Ian Khama, and now President who was also re-elected 2 months ago, Mr. Mokgweetsi Masisi. Also, it was the same case, same scenario. So he thought, and also what we saw happening in the DRC, remember, after the elections happened, over a year ago, and they went into a deal. Remember, Mr. Fanyulu is said to have won the elections, but they were not released after a while. So there was some underhand deals that were between President Joseph Kabila and Mr. Tshisekedi. And so after Tshisekedi came to power, he wanted to be his own person, and we're seeing a bit of tussle here and there. But for Mr. Tshisekedi, it's quite difficult, and it will be very challenging because he has his hands tied. This is because Mr. Kabila's, party that is still the patronage, he's still patroning, has the majority in parliament. Matter of fact, 60% of DRC's, ministers, or of Mr. Tshisekedi's ministers, comes from Mr. Kabila's party. So now what? And parliament. So if you really need to pass these bills, then you have to suck up to Mr. Joseph Kabila and his needs and his people. That he will be manipulated to the end. I don't know if he shall, serve as a president as he would have wanted. If he would, even his vision, it will be dead on arrival if it's anything that he will need to be debated in parliament. He has the majority in Senate. He has the majority in all over Mr. Kabila. So now back to Angola. So Mr. Dos Santos felt, you know what, let me just have this person go there and then he'll protect my interest. Seeing that he was in power for 38 years, a lot he had done that was not right for Angola and for the people of Angola, right? So after that, Mr. Lourenço decided, you know what? The one thing that is bringing this country down is corruption. And guess what? If you've been in power for 38 years, you are the biggest culprit. As we see now, we'll be looking at Algeria. The richest man in Algeria is in the courts. And I'm saying Algeria is setting presidency in Africa, perhaps an example that we should follow. That will deter. You think anybody else coming to power in Algeria would even dare steal from the public, will dare get involved in corruption, because they know the people will call on you to be held accountable. All right. So now we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's just finish with this Angolan story. So now, of course, Isabel dos Santos, the richest woman in Africa, that is according to Forbes, she's worth $2.2 billion US. But now her assets are being freezed. Last week we saw a decision by the Angolan court, and now she's challenging that decision, that it was not right. And we see here how she was fired after the father left as the president, and the new president came into power. She was removed as the chair of the board of the state-owned oil farm Sona Gold. And if it was just maybe a country like Kenya, we don't have so much oil. We're still trying to, just get, if you can get more of that. But we're still not there yet. Not yet. So that wouldn't matter so much, because, but it matters because it is Angola, and it is Angola because Angola is the second largest oil producer in Africa. And so it matters that the father even put her there to chair that. Like the brazen nepotism that is killing a lot of, I'm not even saying it's an African problem, because now we see Trump, the daughter is there, the son-in-law is just there. But for Trump, it's a very singled out special status. I don't know, because it has not happened before in other presidents in the U.S. They're very cognitive of such a thing. You cannot just be nepotic like that as a president. So we see this. So basically, this Angolan oil perhaps became a family affair, because we're also seeing now half-brother of Isabel, Mr. Eduardo dos Santos' other son, also is still facing similar charges there. He's answering to accounts of corruption and things like that. So let's see how this story will go. But I don't know. Perhaps Forbes should review this 2.2 billion, because they're self-made millionaires and wealthy people here in Africa. But when you see somebody, because she was aided, I know she comes out and says she's worked for it. She's 45 years old. She's worked for it. She's accumulated all this wealth by herself. But come on now, girl. If your father put you as the chair the state-owned oil farm in Angola and other places, and you used, basically your father used his powers as the president of the country to even give you opportunities and to open opportunities for you. So come on, I don't know. So let's just see how this case will end. And of course, the family of João Lourenço, who is now the president of Angola, and the former president, Mr. Eduardo dos Santos, also has another headache to deal with, because two of the children are in love. I hear they were engaged. I don't know if the marriage took place, but they were. So it's not just former former political allies now turned to bitter rivals now. But you know what? Also, a family is involved. Because the children of elite, they go to the same schools. They're meant to marry from the same circle. So now the son, the president now of Angola, his son, had been engaged to Mr. Dos Santos' other daughter. So I don't know how that worked out. I don't know if it will stop. I don't know if they continue because, hey, my father is going after your father over the corruption that he oversaw when he was 38 years in power. So I don't know how that has worked out for the Dos Santos family and the Lourenço's family. So that is the latest there. Isabel Dos Santos, the richest woman in Africa, is facing has gone to court to challenge because her assets have been seized in the bid to recover debts she reportedly owes the government. But when you listen to the side of her side of the story and the manner in which the government went, even is pursuing this matter, she's saying no warning was given, no court orders, there was nothing, so perhaps the procedure was not proper, was not in accordance even to the Angolan laws. So let's just see how the story shall end there. All right, so there it is. So anyway, back to South Sudan. My favorite topic here. 22nd of February this year, that is next month, is the new deadline for the unity government to be formed. And now we've seen that the main coalition of donors are calling on leaders to urgently implement remaining tasks of the peace deal before February 22nd, 2020 deadline expires. Now, on Saturday, the United States, Norway, and United Kingdom, and they're known as Troika, the three urged the key principals to the revitalized peace agreement to commit themselves to finalizing the pending tasks before the lapse of the extended deadline. It appears pressure last time didn't work very well. But after the lapse of, the 12th November deadline, like the U.S. did not receive that very kindly. So we saw even it's recalling its ambassador to South Sudan, and they're saying they are reviewing their relationship with South Sudan. And now these are the countries that come together. And why this is important? Because U.S. is the biggest donor to South Sudan in it's all donations in terms of cash and food donations and other essentials, comes to $1 billion per year. So this is something. This is a country, however they are with their very crazy leader over there. South Sudan has to listen to what the U.S. is saying. South Sudan has to pay attention to the concerns the U.S. is raising. And some of these concerns are genuinely other stakeholders are raising as well. Other countries that have been supporting the peace process of South Sudan are raising as well. Because the world is looking forward to a day where South Sudanese can go back to their country and start rebuilding their country. But the process has been made very difficult because of the leadership of South Sudan. And the last time they were having a contention over boundaries, you see how they argue about boundaries as if it's a matter of life and death. And I'm just wondering, is that the most important thing for the people of South Sudan? Is that the thing that the people of South Sudan really want to be addressed right now? Or is that something that they can all come together as the leadership later on after they have agreed on this unity government, and then they can start looking at these matters just one by one after they're all in that country? After Machar is back to Juba, they're all there. They're all living there. They're all working together there. They're all trying to rebuild South Sudan. That is something that I don't know the urgency of this boundary. And so they've used this as the bargaining chip as to why, the excuse as to why they have refused to form the unity government. Because boundaries, you're talking about boundaries and your people are dying from hunger. You're talking about boundaries and you cannot account. You don't have proper structures in place to account for the money the country is making from the oil it has. South Sudan's oil, it works 24 hours. They're getting oil from it. And a report from 2018 staggering amounts of money that the government made. I shall look for the latest from the World Bank report. And now you have to sit there and discuss boundaries as if that is the most important thing. It is important, but is it the most important thing? Is it the one thing that South Sudanese want you to sit there and argue about and not get a solution for it? Right now, I think there are other matters, there are other issues that they must discuss, that I think matters to the people of South Sudan that are not being addressed. Because whatever is being addressed in these peace meetings, President Salva Kiir and Mr. Riek Machar has been having, is just power sharing, power struggles, the ego that is involved in these negotiations. And the larger picture is lost in the process. And the larger picture is the country of South Sudan and the people of South Sudan. And that is where really I don't get. That is the disconnect. You cannot fight about boundaries. And I think somebody also threw in there, one of the government ministers there said, you know what, perhaps we need to have referendum. Who is going to vote in this referendum while you're having over 2 million South Sudanese in refugees camps elsewhere and across the world over? It's even more than that. When you're having some soldiers even are leaving the camps because the supplies have run out. And you're talking about a referendum to determine boundaries as if this is the one thing, if you get, South Sudan will see peace eternally. I think these concerns that the United States and Norway and who else, and the United Kingdom are raising, I think they're very pertinent and I think they're very important. And the South Sudanese leadership should stop taking the world in circles. Because they should tell the world if they are willing or they're not to bring peace in their country. The rest of the world can help up to a certain point, can want it. We cannot want it for you until you want it as much as you should want it more than anybody else in the world. You should want peace in your country more than anybody else in the world. So I think this is a year also, as much as it is a make or break for President Uhuru Kenyatta here in Kenya, because he's counting time. At the end of his term, this in a couple of in 2022. So it's he has time keeps lapsing for him, but also for the leadership of South Sudan. It's about time you decide. And if you cannot lead this country in the manner that it should be led to the proper direction, then maybe you should just give up. You should just leave that leadership, because now you're not being a leader at all. If you cannot put the interests of your people first, which you have proved that you really don't care, then you should just stop calling yourself the president or the vice president or Mr. Machar, opposition leader, for what? And let people who have the interests of the people of South Sudan take charge of that country and make sure that peace is restored, stability is restored, and South Sudan starts working as a normal African other country across the world. So that is just my take there. So I think these concerns are valid from the United States, from Norway, from the United Kingdom, from across board. I don't know. My opinion might not matter so much, but I'm sure a lot of South Sudan, a lot of people who have been, championing and really cheering the people of South Sudan. I was happy when South Sudan got its independence. We were celebrating, we were happy. But now, 2 years later, look at what is happening. And then so many years later, look at where this country is at. So it's not just the people of South Sudan who are disappointed. I'm disappointed, because I grew up with South Sudanese, with the estate where I grew up, a lot of South Sudanese. So I was happy to know, what, finally they have a country where if somebody wants to, a lot of them were born here, my age mates, maybe they were happy to stay here, or if they wanted to go back, it's okay. But now go back to what? So that is where we find ourselves there. So it's disappointing, not just for the people of South Sudan, not just for but also for us as neighbors, for us who have coexisted with South Sudanese, for everybody else across the world who has been supporting this peace process. It's disappointing while you're sitting there just, wanting the world to massage your egos and for the Pope to kiss your feet, and then what? You have nothing to show for it. That should keep you awake. I don't even know how you sleep at night, these people. I don't know how they just have a good night and the world is okay. They should worry that they're putting the people that they're supposed to be taken care of in this precarious position. That should give them sleepless nights, and that they're wearing suits, walking around, that everything is okay. That bothers me. That bothers me. And they can't even agree on boundaries. It has to, what? So this year I'm just hoping and praying, because I'll be here looking at the time. Last time I looked at it until, it was disappointing. So I'm just hoping come the 22nd of February this year, there will be an actual implementation of this peace deal, and there will be an agreement of moving the country forward. You cannot hold a country at a limbo for a very long time. Other unnecessary wars might erupt, and we don't want that. The people there have suffered enough, and I think I've said enough. So let me just move forward, but I can get all in my feelings when it comes to South Sudan, so don't worry about it. Anyway, as I mentioned there earlier, let me see. Somebody here, Bishop Mano, thank you so much. Odobe Collins Chekwebe. You're saying God bless Punchline Africa. Happy New Year to you guys. By the way, the name of Dos Santos is not an African name. How come did they occupy such? It's Dos Santos. I'm forgetting. No, it's not. Dos Santos. It's a Portuguese name or something. And you're saying. By the way, no, you're saying no matter how they try to assimilate the Francophones, they won't succeed. All right. Thank you so much. I think you're from where? You're from Amazonia. Brito Eka is saying the government have all corrupt mechanisms to provide you with end result, whether people stay at home or not. The Amazonian military force is doing a great job to keep. Oh, this. Okay. So, yeah, because I'd mentioned there earlier that the Amazonian military forces are telling people to. There will be a total lockdown in the days in the northwest and southwest region. That is the Amazonian region, in a bid to frustrate the holding of the 2020 municipal and legislative elections. And they're saying that will be from 7th to 12th of February, that is next month. So I think Brighto Eka, that is a response to that, because I'd asked there, is it really unnecessary? If you don't want to vote, just sit at home. Don't go. Matter of fact, get your supplies a day or 2 days earlier that can take you through the couple of days, so that you don't have to meet this military out there and they harm you, because that is what has been happening. Because I know for sure that Mr. Paul Biya's military will be in abundance in that region over those days. So I don't know what would be the wise thing here, because you cannot go fighting with a military that has better sophisticated way. I mean, you can use other ways, and I think the best way, like you've said, it's a lockdown. Just stay at home so that you stay out of harm's way. That is my concern. Yeah. But I understand what you're saying. So thank you so much for writing. Thomas, anti-imperialist Sankara. Judita Zhang, you're saying hello, and hello back to you. Thomas, you're saying peace cannot come to Southern Sudan so long as evil Western nations want their oil for free. They'll always sponsor evil proxies and chaos. Don't mention the West. They are full of evil. Who killed Sankara? Who killed Lumumba? Yes. Especially Sankara and Lumumba. Yeah, Dominique Nwando, you tell me, Miriam, which black country has a good and organized government in the world? Unbelievable. I know. But I don't want to believe entirely this one-sided story that, of course, the white man has been putting out there. I think in Africa, this is just my thought. We have allowed ourselves to be led by people that we elect. First of all, we don't even have a proper criteria where how we choose our leaders. It's very interesting. We either choose them because they come from our clan, or either they speak our language, or either they come, we have our people syndrome, and that is what is bringing us a lot of problems. So we are so used to mediocre leadership that we've become very complacent. So I think the time that Africa will be woke enough to understand that we deserve better, like what Algerians are asking for. And I don't know if maybe they're not doing it the right way, but I'm just saying Algerians are setting a precedence. And what I like about Algeria is there's not been a lot of chaos, and they're making sure that everybody that was part of the 20-year rule of President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, anybody that stole from the economy, anybody that was involved in whatever ill against the people of Algeria and against the country, is held accountable. So now, last week on Tuesday, Algeria's richest man, Mr. Issa Rebrab, who heads the biggest privately owned company, went on trial last Tuesday accused of tax, banking, and custom offenses. Where else have you ever heard, or will you ever hear such a thing happening in Africa? So as much as we, I think this is some good news. And if he's found to really have committed these offenses, let him face a jail term. So in Algeria today, anybody who will be seeking or want to serve in public, they'll be very careful moving forward from what we've been seeing happening. Even a brother of President Bouteflika, who also was part of, served and also benefited illegally in some proceedings there from a public, is serving a 15-year term right now as we speak. He's already in jail, and other officials who served during his leadership. So if we demand, so this example of Algeria, I'm using it because they got tired. They got tired of same thing. They got tired of the same people, the same system, the same process, and they got tired of complaining about the system and it's not working, the judiciary, the what, and they decided, you know what, we want all of them out. We don't even care about the election. We want everybody that is concerned, was part of this. We want them out, and they are making sure that there's accountability. The public in Algeria is demanding for this. So until Africans, the citizens of these wonderful states, 54 states of Africa, until we get to a point where we're 55 plus South Sudan, yes. Until we get to a place where we demand for better, until we get to a place where we say mediocre is not one of the qualities we want in our leadership, corruption should not be mentioned in the same sentence as a president of a country or a minister or any person that has been given a responsibility as a minister or whatever it is in a public arena. Should not be. Until we demand for better, we shall continue complaining about poor governance. We shall continue to complain about impunity that is so brazen. You see a country like Nigeria, High Court gave an order, please, Mr. Sowore should be out of jail. The guy is still in jail. The government feels it's above the law, so it's acting with impunity to disregard its own constitution that it swore to protect and to uphold. And the people in Nigeria are okay. I'm not seeing just a few people who tried to protest, but they were mated with a lot of violence, and you couldn't. But if the whole nation was woke and spoke against some of these things with one voice, then the government will not have a choice but to listen, because there's power in the people. Like in Kenya here, the new constitution, the power was taken back to the people. So today, if we felt President Uhuru Kenyatta was not doing this country a service, or any other elected leader, we have the power to recall him. We have the power to sign some petition and he'll be gone. Yeah? And other countries, I'm sure there are other avenues in the different constitutions we have across Africa that allows for such. But now, and Lumumba Chia, you're saying our institutions are bad. Institutions are not bad. The people we put in those institutions are bad. And the reason why they stay bad and they go there and think they're going to act with impunity is because we don't ask for accountability. We don't seek for quality leadership. We don't demand for it. We're so used to being led with mediocre people. People who can't tell the end from, they can't tell, they're clueless. All right? And they are running economies of these countries. They're sitting down planning 2, 3, 4 years of your life in this country, and you have no say. And these are people who don't even have your interest at heart. And we have allowed it to happen because we have refused to demand for accountability. So we have to come here and, Boko Haram is killing people in Nigeria. We have to come here and see Ambazonians. Now is the 5th year, 2020. Children have not gone to school. As I mentioned there earlier, 260 schools that the Ambazonians had put up to help the children get the little education that they could get, at least the bare minimum, because the public institutions were closed down. Some of them were banned. The government comes and closes all this. And the part of the Francophone, other Cameroon, they're just quiet because it's not me. So I'm not concerned. I'm not bothered. It doesn't touch on me. And they're forgetting whatever goes round always comes back around. Today it could be this part of the world. Tomorrow it could be you who's being affected. And I see it right now, here in this country today. The people who are making the loudest voice, first of all, they're part of the government now. So when some of these things were being directed to the opposition then, they were in complete support. Not just in President Uhuru Kenyatta's government, but even in the previous government. And now they're being dealt with the same way that opposition has been, and they're complaining like, what is happening? I'm thinking, but you were cheering on. So when you're cheering on when something bad is happening, whether you agree with that person or not, but if it's a matter of principle, it's a matter of principle, which we lack in politics here in Africa, to be honest. So you'll be quiet because it doesn't concern me. After all, we are not in the same party. We don't support the same ideologies. I don't care what happens to them. Then the next day the tables turn and now you have a problem. Come on now. So anyway, our institutions are not bad, Mr. Lumumba Chia. Our institutions are not bad. And when you go through the constitutions we have in Africa, they are wonderful on paper. On paper, they are great. It is the implementation. And when you look at even our BBI report, this one President Uhuru Kenyatta launched a couple of months ago, I think was it in November. It's good, and it has thrown this country into another hula blue, politicians all over the place. We're not even catching a break. When you look at things like inclusivity, all the things that it appears that Kenyans have not been enjoying together. When you go back to the Constitution, you'll find a lot of these things are already there. It is the implementation that is a problem. We have very good constitutions, fairly good across Africa. We have very good institutions. In Kenya, we have anti-corruption body that was formed as an act of parliament to curb corruption. Until we had a new leadership the other day, that's when we saw that institution actually looking as if it's fighting corruption. But since then, nothing was really happening there. You understand? So we have wonderful institutions. We have fairly good constitutions. It is the implementation. It is the brazen disrespect and disregard of the same constitution. Because what is an institution? It's just a building there, and then you put people there to do whatever responsibilities that they're supposed to be doing under that. But if you put the wrong people there, with the wrong agenda there, then here we are. Ogebe Omoto Chan, you're saying the institutions in Africa are good, but we have not good managers, only good corrupt leaders. Yeah, exactly. So we cannot blame our institutions anymore. Yeah, it's the people that are in those institutions that is a problem. Okay, we cannot sometimes blame our laws anymore, because if you took your time and just went through the different constitutions, it's fairly good. Maybe a few need some, just working on, but it's fairly good. But the people we elect there, they come and decide, you know what, this part of the constitution does not serve my private interest and aspiration. So what I will do now is I will change this constitution to suit me. And now we have the third term dilemma that we see in across Africa. We have the deaths that we saw happening in Burundi in 2015 when President Pierre Nkurunziza decided he wants to insisted on having another term and adding even presidential the term limit, the term years. It was 5, he put it to 7, and I think removed the term limit. So it's ridiculous, right? So in that regard, we support. Yeah, and then we forget that this person might not be in power, even that long, or maybe they will not even finish that part, because who are we to say? God might decide, you know what, let me just remove you from this earth, and then the next person comes, and those laws you put in place, like Dr. Matsanga here keeps saying when people bring up the issue of Uganda, that Mr. Akiza Besigye was part of President Yoweri Museveni's leadership, and some of these laws that are affecting him today, he was part of the team that put those policies in place. So you forget, you think you're doing it to hurt that other person. You're forgetting one day you might need some justice, some fairness, but the laws that you put in place thinking that they will affect the other people, they come biting you so hard. And now, I don't know, where will you run to? So anyway. So, all right. So we saw that attack that happened over the weekend, and now the U.S. has confirmed that 1 service member and 2 Department of Defense contractors were killed on Sunday in the Manda Bay terrorist attack in Lamu. That is the southern, the coastal part of Kenya, and that I think area is closer borders Somalia. So Al-Shabaab went there and attacked. Of course, 5 Al-Shabaab members were killed, and the Kenya Defense Forces really responded there. But the U.S. had lost 1 service member and 2 Department of Defense contractors there. That happened. So, of course, this happened after that assassination that happened there of Mr. Soleimani in Iraq. I think he was headed to the airport going back to Iran. I'm not sure where he was going to, but he was, assassinated there by the U.S. in near the airport in Iraq. And that was the news over the weekend, and the implications of this act by the United States. And this is something I said I will not get into too much the details of it, because Dr. Matsanga will be here later, and we'll be looking at that. The implications. What will that mean to Africa? Kenya, we have suffered a terror attack before, over something we knew nothing of, over a debt we didn't even know we owed the world. In 1998, we didn't even know. That is the first time some of us came to know the word terror attack. We were clueless. We were just going about our lives, trying to build our economies, trying to put the food on the table in 1998. So we are casualties of a proxy war. And because Iran has no capacity to attack the U.S. directly, and I was seeing the Hezbollah, as I said there earlier, they're coming out and they're saying, oh no, we have to avenge. You think they'll go and attack the U.S.? They can't do that. They don't have the capacity. Hezbollah from Lebanon, they can't do that. Who are they going to attack? The interest of the United States across the world. The people who are perceived to be friendly to the United States across the world. So there you go. Just one bad judgment, and the world cannot catch a break. All right, so we shall talk about that. So a vote happened over the weekend at the United Nations General Assembly. Remember the case that the Gambia took to the International Court of Justice on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation against the prosecution of the Rohingya Muslims by Myanmar. You remember that case? Yeah, so the Gambia went ahead and did that and filed a case at the ICJ. So over the weekend, there was a vote at the United Nations General Assembly on Myanmar persecution of the Rohingya Muslims. And the resolution, it's called The Situation of Rohingya Muslims and Other Minorities in Myanmar. And it was passed by overwhelmingly 134 countries in favor of that resolution, and as again 9 were opposed and 28 were absent, and the absent ones included Kenya, Cameroon, Eritrea in Africa, Burundi, Namibia, Lesotho, Zambia. That were among the African countries that were absent to take this vote. 28 countries were absent, but Kenya there and a few other African countries among others. But in Africa, it's Kenya, Cameroon, Burundi, Eritrea, Namibia, Lesotho, and Zambia that were absent. But what really was the news of the day is Zimbabwe became the only African country that voted against this resolution. I don't know what statement Zimbabwe was trying to make there at United Nations. Maybe they're just trying to, I don't know, I don't understand. But Zimbabwe was the only African country. Kenya chose to be absent, and I get it. Sometimes you have different interests, and the enemy of another country might not be your enemy. So sometimes these countries have their own interests, and Kenya, I'm sure, in its best interest, and these are the African countries that. But I don't know. I'm still trying to understand. Kenya is in the company of Eritrea, Burundi, Cameroon, Namibia, Lesotho, and Zambia. They refused. They absconded. So I'm assuming other African countries that were present there voted to pass this resolution. The situation of this case will go further. But Zimbabwe decided no, we don't agree with this. So Zimbabwe was among other countries that voted to not to have Myanmar prosecuted or face charges over the prosecution of the Rohingya Muslims there. Among other countries that voted, together with Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is the only African country. So let's understand this. So among other countries that voted against this resolution, as I said, Zimbabwe is the only African country that voted against this resolution. Other countries like Kenya were absent, I think absconded. So among these other countries were Cambodia, Belarus, China, Laos, Myanmar itself, Philippines, Russia, and Vietnam. Okay. So I see where Zimbabwe has been wanting to take its elephant tusks. That side, yeah? Or maybe it's, I don't know. What could be the reason why Zimbabwe was the only African country that voted against this? Yeah? What statement was Zimbabwe trying to make there at the United Nations General Assembly, voting against this resolution to hold Myanmar accountable for the prosecution of the Rohingya Muslims? We saw those images. It's horrifying to see. And the camp that they were now in Indonesia, who knows how long they're going to stay there. They were uprooted from their country in Myanmar. So Zimbabwe decides, you know what, we're not voting for this. Myanmar did not do anything wrong, so we're not here for it. So it's very interesting. I would really love to understand what really advised this move by Zimbabwe to be the only African country to vote against this resolution. I don't know just by a long shot. What do you think could be one of the reasons why Zimbabwe refused to, one, abscond or not to vote, or two, to vote for? what statement, what kind of message is Zimbabwe trying to give out to the world? And I think this will put it in a lot of other problems moving forward this year. Udo, you're saying, all hail Biafra citizens all over the world. Good morning, brothers and sisters home and abroad. Please support Biafra referendum. All right. So we talked about Biafra earlier on, and some message that Mr. Nnamdi Kanu had for the end of the year. And he said that some parts of northern part of Nigeria, some states are operating under the Sharia law outside of the constitution. So he's not, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu was arguing that he does not understand why they're saying that the Biafran are calling for a referendum or want to self-determine is unlawful, because there are other parts and states in Nigeria, especially the northern parts, who are operating under the Sharia law, which is against the constitution, the larger constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So they're saying, so why is it that when Biafrans want to self-determine and want to have a referendum and is asking for something different, we're being termed as unlawful? I don't know. I don't know what the argument by Nnamdi Kanu, does it hold? Does it hold? Of course, there are double standards in the manner in which this matter has been held or has been, we've seen, by the Nigerian government. So I want to thank you so much. I think my time is about up. Thank you so much for, your patronage. Thank you so much for being with me. We shall be back later on in the afternoon with Dr. Batanga, and we'll be looking at that assassination of Mr. Soleimani on Friday by the United States. It happened in Iraq, and he's being buried, I think, today. I was just wondering, here's are Muslims. Do they not just bury immediately? Or this move by Iran and Iraq? When I was leaving my house in the morning and I was watching the funeral procession, a lot of people came out and they were crying and mourning. And I'm thinking, okay, this is working very well in the psychology of the people there and even the sympathizers. So out of this, you don't know how many martyrs will come out and say, you know what? In the name of our leadership and our freedom and our religion, we're going to go out there and make sure that, we fight, we kill, we maim. They've done it so well. The propaganda by Iran, of course, what the US did was wrong, but if you see how this funeral, the way it's being done, it's a proper oiled propaganda machine, which will bear wonderful fruits, and the world will see it in good time, and it might not be very good for the rest of us. So I want to thank you so much for your time. I want to thank you so much. This was the first for me, Good Morning Africa this year, 2020. Taking a short break and just joined back today. And earlier in the beginning of the show, we mentioned a lot of other activities and other news that we shall be following across Africa this year. And if there's anything else there that you'd want us to talk about this year, please always feel free and share with us. And we shall be happy to share with the rest of the world. My name is Miriam Okutu. It has been a pleasure. Bye-bye for now.